which has taken so many by surprise are Celinda Lake again, a pollster for the Democratic Party, and Eric Ham, an expert on the Republicans and the author of a book on the internal tensions in the party, and James Kirchick from the Daily Beast. It's good to have you all here. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. James, I'm going to start with you first of all. You're a Republican, but not a Trump supporter. How are you feeling?
Not a Republican, conservative, I would say. It's horrifying. And I think it's much worse for the world, actually, than it is for the United States. I think we have institutions in this country. We have a free press. We have different branches of government that will hopefully be able to contain a man who clearly has dictatorial, authoritarian impulses. What I'm really worried about is the liberal international order. This is a candidate who has denigrated NATO, which is the most successful military alliance since the end of World War II, the most important alliance of liberal democracies at a time when we were seeing Russian expansionism and aggression and war again on the European continent. This is a man who has a purely transactional view of America's relationship with the world. He has no appreciation or understanding for values. Everything is which countries can pay the United States in exchange for our protection or whatnot. He's openly called for nuclear proliferation. He said that our allies in the Middle East, like Japan and South Korea, should perhaps start building nuclear bombs because the United States isn't going to extend its defense umbrella as it has in the past. So I'm very worried more for the state of the world, actually, than I am for my own country.
Celinda, Hillary Clinton campaigned on the platform that it was going to be another term for Barack Obama and extending his legacy. The fact of the matter is now that legacy is dead in the water, isn't it? Pretty much.
That's right. And I think one of the first actions unquestionably they will take is repeal of the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, which is the signature accomplishment of the administration. I think much of the administration's economic policies, making the wealthy pay more of their fair share, a more global trade orientation, are dead in the water as well.
Eric, I mean, as a study, a man who studied the Republicans and the tensions within the party, I mean, this is a man who said he's going to restore confidence to America, he's going to rebuild inner cities, he's going to spend money on infrastructure, he's going to make America great again, he's going to do all this stuff. We know how big the deficit is that America has. How is that tension going to work with the Tea Party folk in Congress?
Get ready
who like small, limited government.
Exactly, and then get ready for more tensions, especially when if Speaker Paul Ryan intends to maintain his position as Speaker of the House, because he is someone who is very fiscally conservative, and so I think there's going to be a lot of back and forth, a lot of fights. Many people are thinking that Trump has the wind at his back because he will have a Republican-controlled Congress, and that might be true. But I think there will be some fights, particularly among spending battles, regarding, where do we actually put our precious resources. I would imagine Trump will want to spend more on military defense matters, and it'll be interesting to see if he does want to actually play in urban areas, in more impoverished areas across the country. I just don't know if Republicans will want to do that. And so I think you're going to see a lot of ideological fights continue to take place between Trump and particularly the House. I think Senate will try to stay out of the fight. Mitch McConnell is very adept at, I think, being able to maneuver in government, but I do think we're going to still see many fights between Trump and the Republicans going forward.
Sure. I mean, James, the election cycles here are relentless. By the time you've finished one election, you've got to start thinking about the other one. And the bottom line is you've got a very, very powerful House, you've got a Republican majority in the Senate, and you have, as you suggested, a Republican president with dictatorial leaning, shall we put it that way, in your words. In 2 years' time, when we get the midterms, there's no one else to blame, is there, as far as the Republicans are concerned, if they do not deliver on the promises, the endless promises that we've seen from Donald Trump?
I guess, yeah, that's maybe a silver lining to this whole debacle.
What, that they might get kicked out?
Well, that there might be a reaction against the Republicans in Congress, and that you would see them perhaps losing some support there. But again, I mean, with three branches potentially with the Supreme Court, who knows what's going to happen over the next couple of years and who he will replace the judges with. I don't think it's a very healthy experiment that we're about to be entering.
Sure.
in terms of one-party control of government.
Yeah. Selena, James mentioned the Supreme Court there. For a lot of people who had enormous problems with Donald Trump as far as his treatment of women, minorities, the way he's talking about Mexicans all being rapists and so on and so forth, for a lot of voters who had ideological problems with him on those issues, the Supreme Court was actually the key for them because they did not want Hillary Clinton having a liberal Supreme Court with potentially 2 picks in coming years.
So I think there were 2 factions within the Trump support. One was the culturally conservative faction, feeling threatened by changes in our society, including the expansion of women's rights, the expansion of gay and lesbian rights. And you're right, the Supreme Court was an essential key to them. And if you notice, Donald Trump didn't ever talk about that until he was trying to sew up the Republican nomination. Both of my colleagues, frankly, are more knowledgeable on that than I am. The second faction was a downscale economic faction, the very faction that you saw in Brexit, that you're seeing all over Europe in these nationalistic parties. And I think the real challenge here for Democrats is not just the Supreme Court, which will be around for the rest of our lives, but also how do we get an economic profile that offers real opportunity to people up and down the economic ladder.
And finally, Eric, was the problem for the Democrats that they concentrated far too much on the Sun Belt and that demographic that was supposed to be growing and would keep them in power in perpetuity, Latinos, African Americans and so on, and ignoring white working class voters who still frankly are the majority of the voting population here?
I wouldn't say that they ignored the Rust Belt area. In fact,
I don't think she ever went to Wisconsin in this election cycle.
Well, of course not. But I mean, what Democrat would go to Wisconsin?
And that's the problem.
And
that's why they've lost.
But that's not a place that has typically been a place where Democrats had to spend time and where I think where the problem came was in a state like Pennsylvania. Keep in mind, Hillary Clinton was actually born in Pennsylvania. I mean, she's a child of Scranton. You've got Joe Biden. So that was a state that I think Democrats expected to carry, along with Michigan and Wisconsin, but unfortunately they didn't. So I think there's got to be a lot of soul searching among Democrats, not just on what happens out west, but more focused on what do we do to try to bring these conservative Democrats and some of these moderate Republicans in the Midwest and Rust Belt areas back into the Democratic fold.
Eric, Celinda, and James, it's good to have you all here with us. Thanks for joining us. Thank you.